today's a day to try to touch base with them and get plugged in or ask any questions that you might have. And also, we're going to have a little bit of a drawing afterwards, so I encourage everyone to stick around after Mike is done, and we'll have that drawing in. Okay?
Here's December. And this is the 5th. We do these about one every 2 counties, and we switch off from year to year. So next year, we probably, I don't think this is a city where we do it every year. There's some cities where we do it every other year. Anyway, up on the table up front, there's a bunch of handouts and brochures and stuff. And one of them is this registration form for the National Weather Service.
Let her copy some stuff off.
If you have a chance to fill it out, it helps us because if you give us some information, if you fill this out and give us all your contact information, it makes it easier for us to get a hold of you if we have any questions about what you reported. Like if you reported a tornado or some such thing, we can get back to you and find out exactly what it was that you had. And you don't have to fill the whole thing out if you just want to fill out the name. As much as you want to fill out is fine. And then we really need a head count, so I think Kelly's going to help us with that, get a head count. And I know you registered with her, so at least we'll know how many were here. If you don't have time to fill this out, like during the break or whatever, and you want to fill it out online when you get home, these little pieces of paper are also up front on that table up there. And you can take this home and register it. And then when we're done, there's a certificate. If you need this to document the fact that you went through training, pick this up. We got plenty of those up front as well. If you don't fill out the names, just fill your name in, or you don't even have to fill your name in. Just any kind of documentation is needed by your superiors to show that you took the training, then go ahead and take one of these. Okay, that's pretty good. It's usually about half. It hasn't changed a great deal, but the person who puts this together, puts the slides together, usually shuffles it up a little bit, adds some new things. It's kind of been shortened up over the last 5 years. It gets a little bit shorter every year, so it's not the 2 to 3 hour class that we may have taken years ago. It's more like an hour or 2 now. Anyway, my name is Mike Luck, and welcome to the class. Storm spotting is a very difficult thing to do. You probably already know that if you've tried it. It's hard to do accurately, hard to do consistently. Every thunderstorm situation is different. Every storm season brings new learning experiences. So you will never really be perfect at it. It's not one of those things that you can do perfectly. And just because you take this class doesn't make you an expert. It doesn't make me an expert. Nobody's really an expert at it. So don't expect, if you haven't taken this before, don't expect to suddenly be a world-class authority on storm spotting. It's not quite what it used to be, but there's still a lot of information in here, and I hope you enjoy it. And ask questions. If you have any, just raise your hand or shout out whatever you need to do to get my attention. I mentioned already about the sign-up form. If you can sign up with us, either with a sheet of paper or online. The online form has your name, email address, phone number, street address. If you do fill that out, you will get you'll be on our emailing list. We have what we call a spin message, and basically we send one of those out when we're expecting a severe weather outbreak or any kind of a major storm, so you get a little heads up on that. And also whenever we have any kind of event you'd be interested in, for example, the Tri-State Tornado Commemoration Ceremony there at John A. Logan that we had on Wednesday, I think we sent one out about that. If you give us your email address, you'll automatically be on that spin list. Okay, if you're not familiar with the National Weather Service, we're a federal agency that covers the whole 50 states and its territories, including Guam and Puerto Rico, pretty much any U.S. territory. There are about 110 offices or so around the country. The Paducah office covers parts of 4 states. More specifically, we have 58 counties that we cover, from Evansville, Indiana, down to about Poplar Bluff, Missouri, and most of southern Illinois, basically along the south of I-64. We cover that area as well. So Marion is pretty close to the center of our area and gets good radar coverage from the Paducah radar. Skywarn program's been around a long time, since the 1960s. The Weather Service has had what was called Skywarn, and it's basically a training program for ordinary citizens like yourselves who want to be able to help their community by spotting severe weather. The National Weather Service is responsible for issuing severe weather warnings that alert people when a potential threat will affect their area. We study the environment in great detail, we monitor radar data, and the radar data has limitations. This is not a perfect science, and computers and radar tell us a lot, but they never tell us with 100% certainty what's going on. And that's why we need spotters. Real-time reports, in other words, reports sent as they're happening, they make our warnings much more accurate, more credible, and more timely. And we also use spotter reports for post-storm verification. We want to know how we did. Did we get the warning right? Should we have not issued it, or should we have issued it? A lot of times the only way we know that a warning verified is through spotter reports. So we're always going to need spotter reports because this will never be a perfect science or perfect radars or perfect computers.
Storm spotters have to be available. As a storm spotter, you'll be observing your local weather conditions, whether it's estimating the size of a hailstone or watching a suspicious cloud for signs of rotation. As a spotter, you will also need to be able to properly identify what you're seeing and to decide whether it's something that should be reported. And finally, a spotter needs to be able to make timely and accurate reports. And that's really what storm spotter is all about. You need to know what to report and know the specifics of how to get that report to the right people. Spotters should focus on the past and the present and not try to get into predicting the future. Report what you saw or what's happening right now, but avoid trying to predict what's going to be happening minutes from now. Storm spotters are an important part of the integrated warning team. This is the team made up of the National Weather Service, emergency management and public safety officials, and the media, who are responsible for getting critical information out to help people protect themselves from dangerous weather. Real-time weather observations from storm spotters help make this system work by giving emergency managers and local officials information to help them make local warning decisions, by providing the media with ground truth about what's actually occurring, and by giving the National Weather Service details about the local weather that can help forecasters make critical warning decisions.
So the Weather Service is basically a part of a team that helps get warnings out. The media, broadcast media, obviously is important for getting the warnings out, and the emergency management community, which includes pretty much everyone in here in a way, is very important, because without the information coming in, we can't do a good job either. We need people to help us get information, and we need people to help us get the information out. Now this slide was added because we had been noticing that a lot of people were reporting severe weather, but it wasn't getting to us. And that's because a lot of times there's a middleman that relays the information. So if your organization, whatever it might be, whether it's an amateur radio group, TV station, whatever, if you solicit reports, it is the responsibility of your organization to get those reports to the National Weather Service promptly, like seconds. That should be really your first thought. If you cannot ensure immediate relay to the Weather Service, either via our spotter hotline or our chat, then we ask that the spotter contact us directly. And if it's a very critical situation like a tornado or something, you should kind of think of it the way you would think of emergency such as a robbery or a fire or something, you wouldn't wait around. You'd report it very promptly. So anyway, the Weather Services were the only entity responsible for issuing warnings and capable of reaching 100% of those in harm's way. A variety of ways now. We've got, with this high technology age we live in, we've got all different methods. We've got social media now, Facebook, Twitter, of course TV stations have always been around. We've got telephone call down lists, like the code red system, cell phone alerts. There's just a whole bunch of ways that the information can get out from the Weather Service. But if the information doesn't reach us, then it's not going to reach 100% of the people. So we ask that you promptly relay your reports or have them relayed to the Weather Service if you can. So we want to hear from you. When you see severe weather of any kind, one of your first thoughts should be to report it. And conceivably, your report could make a difference between life and death. Even in just a few seconds or minutes could be detrimental to the process. And don't assume we know what's going on. There may be a tornado warning, but just because we put out a tornado warning doesn't mean we know there's a tornado. A lot of our tornado warnings, we only have about a 50-50 confidence that there's actually a tornado. So we need reports, because if we're issuing tornado warnings around hearing of any tornadoes, we may stop issuing the tornado warnings, thinking that we're not on the right track here. So having ground truth reports makes our warnings more believable as well. If the public hears a tornado and it's based on radar, they're less likely to take it seriously than if someone actually reported a tornado on the ground. Spotters can save lives. This is about 3 years ago in Michigan. A spotter reported a tornado as it was forming and relayed it over hand radio. He was the first one to report this tornado after the warning was issued about 20 minutes earlier. So the sirens were sounded and the warnings were updated. And as the spotter said, the adrenaline was up, the commitment was there. I was a part of it. Anyway, he's feeling very into it. He's definitely part of a very important process. And that's, if you're in a situation like that, you are very important. And most of the time, spotting is not this glamorous and exciting. I don't know how many times any of us have seen a tornado, but it's pretty rare. But if you're in the right time, in the right place, you can be a very key part of the warning process. So in this case, amateur radio operators, they help to save lives by confirming the existence of a tornado. That reinforce the gravity and the importance of the situation in the eyes of the public. And that's from the Emergency Management Director of Washtenaw County, Michigan, in the Detroit metro area. So what actually happened there? They had an EF3 tornado, which EF3 tornadoes do extensive damage to buildings. And in this case, there were about 380 homes damaged, but there was not one injury, much less a fatality. So this was a very effective warning. People obviously took the right actions. Nobody was hurt. So without spotters, it's likely the government officials and the Weather Service would not have known about the touchdown until the first 911 call. And by then, some of the safety measures taken, including the second warning, may have been too late. Now, how do you make your report? Our office has a 1-800 hotline, which is for reporting severe weather. It's 1-800-533-7189. And there is an index card up front on that table that has the number on it. And it's not a business card, but it's basically an index card for helping you spot severe weather. It has a little diagram of a supercell thunderstorm. It'll help you remember what I teach here today. And then a second way, you can report online. We have an online report form, which I'll show you here in just a second. We have Twitter and Facebook, and we also have an amateur radio desk. However, the amateur radio desk is usually not manned unless it's a very high-end severe weather event. So once again, here's our spotter hotline. Again, if you can't write it down or whatever, or program it in your cell phone, there's some index cards on the front table. Just follow us with an information. When you make a report, please try to be specific. For one thing, if you can tell us if you're a spotter, that helps a lot. Because if you don't mention that, we take reports from the general public a little more, with less credibility than we would from spotter, because a spotter has training, so we trust the spotter reports more than we would a report from Joe Schmo. And then what you saw, and try to be specific again. If it's hail you saw, we need to know what size. And if you can be specific about the size, just say large hail, that doesn't really mean anything. If you say quarter size hail, that means a lot, because a quarter is 1 inch in diameter. And then where you saw it. And when you say where you saw it, again, try to be specific, but not overly specific. If you give us just your street name and number, obviously we won't know what that is, because we've got 58 counties that we cover. So try to give a somewhat well-known city and say what distance and direction you are from that city. And if you're reporting any kind of tornadic activity like falling cloud or tornado, try and remember that the feature is not where you're at. You're seeing it from a distance, hopefully. So,
Mike,
yes.
direction on that side, Williamson section 199.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the spotter ID number is AH spotter, is for train spotters only. That should be the one that you use. There's also one for the general public, NWSPAH, and then there's one for the Evansville media market called hashtag Tri-State Weather. That's more for southeast Illinois around the Wabash River and areas east of there. And when we're monitoring Twitter and Facebook, we have a platform called Hootsuite. This is what it is, and it basically shows us all of the Facebook and Twitter activity associated with those, our Facebook page and those hashtags I told you about. And you can use those as well to monitor what's coming out of our office. And depending on the situation, we may have a lot on Facebook. Normally, we only post something on Facebook twice a day. We use method of communication at our office. However, in a high-end severe weather event, if we're expecting tornadoes or such, we normally have a volunteer come in and staff the ham radio desk. Some of the repeaters that we monitor in our area are listed up there, but the primary one would be the one in Paducah, 14706. And it does have Echolink on it, so if you are familiar with Echolink, no matter where you are in our 58 county area, you can access that repeater. Now, what do you report? Pretty much anything that could be a hazard, anything that could cause damage, injuries, things like, obviously, anything that's rotating, like funnel clouds, tornadoes, small clouds. Any size hail, we like to hear about that. Flash flooding, any kind of flooding, wind speeds, anything that could cause damage. Over 40 miles an hour is the threshold where we start getting small branches down and debris on roadways, things like that. Rainfall amounts, meaning heavy rainfall amounts. If you've had more than an inch or two in a day, we need to know about that. And then any kind of injuries, fatalities, damage. Odds are pretty good we will hear about that before you tell us if it's that major. I mean, if there's fatalities, we usually hear about it as soon as it happens, but not always. And then even the focus of this class is on thunderstorms and tornadoes, but we're also interested in stuff like winter weather. When you start getting slippery road conditions, we'd like to hear about that as well. The precip type, when you have a changeover in precipitation type, and also dense fog. Like this morning, there was some patch of dense fog on my way here. Important hail, marble size is vague because marbles come in different sizes, anywhere from smaller than a dime to almost a quarter. So marble size is not a helpful report. If you can use a coin, that is probably one of the most common ways. If the hail, well, the best way is to measure the hailstone with a ruler. That's a little tricky sometimes if you don't want to go up and obviously wait until it's over and then measure the size of it. That's the best way. Put something in the freezer and then measure it. But sometimes hail comes in different shapes, which complicate, weather's never easy, it's never simple and clear cut, so sometimes we get these odd-shaped hailstones, and that makes it difficult to measure, so just do the best you can. Now, there may not be any damage other than tree damage, and so we use trees a lot to estimate wind speed. And these excerpts up here are taken from the Fujita scale. You've probably heard of that. That's the scale that we've been using for decades to determine tornado intensities. It's been modified. It's now called the Enhanced Fujita scale. And it gets very specific about the types of trees that were damaged and the types of limbs and branches. Typically, any significant tree damage, the winds were at least 60 miles per hour. If you have a lot of snap or uprooted trees, probably over 80. Definitely over 80. Now, post-event stuff you want to send us, you can send it to that email address, pah.ops@noaa.gov. Now, that's not something we monitor continuously, so don't send urgent reports that way. But if the next day you think, oh, they might be interested in this flooding video, go ahead and send it to that email address, and we will definitely look at it, if nothing else. And you can also, I guess, text message to an email address. It's right next to the problems. Here is the one of the first warnings that was issued for that event. And all of our warnings now are in the shape of a polygon. The only way you can see that is if you have internet access, or on television. Otherwise, if you're just listening to the radio, you'll have to hear the text version of the warning, which is on the left side of the screen. But in any case, this particular warning, here's the supercell thunderstorm that caused the tornado. It's moving into the warning box. Paducah's right here. Of course, Ohio River's here. And anyway, the storm tracked right along the center part of the box. The report's right there. And the text part of the warning did include information from some of our trained weather spotters. Like it says in yellow up there, weather spotters reported a funnel cloud. That definitely gave credibility to the warning, and people in the path of the storm knew that it wasn't totally based on radar. Weather spotters had actually seen a tornadic type of phenomenon. So that's an example of how weather spotters contributed to the warning process on that day. And here's your weather statement for this issue after we got the report from trained spotter about the tornado in Valley County. It says right there, source weather spotters confirmed the tornado. So that undoubtedly got the attention of some people, and they probably took shelter. Well, they took shelter because of the actual confirmation. Sometimes people may not take shelter if it's only radar indicated, but in this case, the weather spotters are confirmed. And in this case, we're also posting these reports in real time on our Facebook and Twitter feeds. That's not something we do every time, but on this particular day, we were doing that. And the tornado hit report this after 2 o'clock, and 3 people were killed in that tornado. Now here's a map of the damage path of the tornado. It started west of Paducah along the McManus Valley County line about 205, and then it tracked east, and our office is right about in there, so we're only passing a few miles north of our office. This particular tornado was wrapped in rain, so it was very hard to see, but at least one of our forecasters could see out the front door of the office, could see it a little bit. And it was only about an EF1 in this area. But as we cross the Ohio River right near the I-24 bridge, past the south of the I-24 bridge over the bottlenecks there. I think that climatology of tornadoes, you probably may or may not know, tornadoes are most frequent during the late afternoon and evening hours. That's the time of day day when the atmosphere is the most unstable. Usually we have a very typical spring or summer day. We usually have our highest instability during the daytime hours. As we cool off at night, it gets more stable, and we typically have less tornado activity. But in the fall, and when we have a strong storm system, sometimes the strong south winds will make the atmosphere unstable even at night. So sometimes we have some pretty strong tornadoes late at night, especially in the fall and winter. That's when we typically get our stronger nighttime tornadoes. And these numbers are just for our 50-year period between 1995, which is when our office opened, and 2004. There's different types of thunderstorms ranging from single cell to supercell. The supercell is primarily what we talk about in this class. That's the kind of storm that produces most of our strong or violent tornadoes. We can have weak, short-lived tornadoes from multi-cells, but they're very hard to spot, and they're typically very difficult to. They're so small and short-lived, they're tough to do anything with, basically. Single-cell thunderstorms are typically not severe, but they can be what we call pulse severe, which means they pulse up to severe levels for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Those are the kinds of storms, the pop-up storm we get on a hot July afternoon. There's a ton of instability. The storm's out of nowhere, produces a microburst or a hail, and then it disappears. That would be a pulse severe storm. Multi-cells are everything in between single cell and supercell, which is about 90% of all storms. Basically, multi-cell is any cluster or line of storms. It's a catch-all for pretty much everything. Multi-cell storms that develop into the line, that's called a S.T.O.R.M line, and I'll show you some examples of those. Those are primarily associated with strong winds. Whenever you see a line of storms, strong winds is usually the main hazard for those. When you see a slow line kind of develop into a bow, what we call a bow echo, that's a sign that it's accelerating. That part of the line is kind of speeding up, and it's normally producing some strong winds, not always. But this is a tip-off that we're having very damaging winds when we see the bowing of the storm like this, or like that. And this would be racing northeastward, this would be racing eastward if it was animated. And the strongest winds would be right near the apex of that bow. So, a lot of times we will have severe thunderstorm warnings out, even without a spotter report, because we're very suspicious of these bow or bow-shaped vectors. Now, if you're spotting the slow lines, it depends a little bit on the time of year. In spring or summertime, the lines aren't moving as fast, so you can oftentimes stay out ahead of the line, and you can observe the wind speed along that leading edge of the line. If you're mobile, you can, and this is more for storm chasers, you can stay out ahead of the line. If you get behind the line, then look for damage behind it. A great way to get wind speeds is with a manometer, whether handheld or otherwise. That's the best way, but if you're backing that, then you just have to look at the trees and observe any tree damage or any other damage. Now, during the cool season, which would be mainly fall and winter, the slow lines oftentimes move a lot faster, like 60 to 80 miles per hour. So you're not going to be able to know those most of the time. And typically, if there are any small tornadoes embedded in the slow line, they're very hard to see with the slow line. And that's another reason why we don't spend a lot of time on that during spider training. We're talking more about supercell tornadoes. Because they are normally the worst kind of tornadoes. Supercells are the primary severe weather producers. They are basically the tornado machines You can get tornadoes from other cells, but supercells are our primary tornado producers, and that's why the course focuses on those
60 people show
more
up.
than anything else.
That's the best one.
This is a diagram of a supercell. Ideally, you would be able to see everything. You'd be able to see the tornado, you'd be able to see the anvil and everything. But in order to see the anvil, you have to be pretty far from the storm. You can't be under it to see that. And then to see the tornado, you have to be pretty close to it. So you'll never see all of this the way it's pictured here. But long story short, I mentioned every thunderstorm has an anvil. Well, this storm has a very well-defined anvil that you can see. The tornado is usually on the back side of the storm. The storm is moving from your left to your right. So the back side is where you have your tornado and your low cloud. And then the downdraft area with all the rain and hail is kind of in the forward part of the storm.
Rotating grass, also known backpack on the table, your backpack. The strongly rotating grass, also known as supercells, develop from the mid-spheres and returns in a clockwise direction through the lowest mile of the atmosphere. Wind speed is sufficiently strong, veering will find its presence. Horizontally oriented rolls develop in the lower levels of the atmosphere. When these rolls are tilted by a thunderstorm updraft in a rotation about a vertical axis, a mesocyclone may develop. A mesocyclone is defined as an area of deep storm scale rotation, usually associated with a strong updraft.
They consist of updrafts and downdrafts, and the difference between a severe storm or a prolonged severe storm and a non-severe storm is that the downdrafts and updrafts are not suffocating each other out in a supercell. You can kind of think of a supercell as a two-part engine where you have the warm, moist air being kind of sucked up into the storm, and then you have a downdraft consisting of the cool, moist air that's being, the moist air, the cool air is heavier, so it tends to sink. So the updraft tower is the part of the storm where you have your big cumulus cloud. It's warm, moist air rising up into the storm. It's kind of like the fuel for the storm. That's your unstable air that the storm needs to survive. And then underneath the updraft is where you have your rotating wall clouds. If you had any rotation, that's where it would be. And usually the updraft is above a rain-free base because the updraft is holding up the rain and the hail, so you don't have precipitation under it. So your rain-free updraft would be right there, and then the downdraft is where the rain and hail is right here. And then, as I mentioned, the downdraft is basically the exhaust manifold where your rain, hail, cooler air, and even maybe some downbursts are occurring, and sometimes a little shelf cloud precedes it. We talked about shelf clouds with squall lines, but supercells can also have a shelf cloud. Earlier was asking me what happens when you see a cumulus cloud go up over that anvil. That's called an overshooting top. So if you ever see the top of the cloud going up above the anvil, that's an overshooting top, and that means there's very strong updrafts in it, and it's probably severe, but not necessarily. But at the very least, there's a whole lot of heavy rain in it, and probably some hail. Very, very strong thunderstorm. And if you notice, the edges of the cumulus cloud are really crisp, like a cauliflower type. That's also a sign of a strong updraft, and the edges of it are really well-defined and crisp, like the picture on the right. But if you just have clouds moving in different directions with no circular motion, that's just shear. Here's a couple pictures of wall clouds. The one on the left is like a flying saucer type Because there's no wall cloud, no matter what, you will have rotation if you have a tornado. So rotation is definitely the main thing to look for when you have a suspected tornado. Again, there's a time lapse, so rotation is a lot more visible. It's not quite so obvious in slow motion. Some characteristics of a wall cloud. Because the wall cloud is part of the supercell, and because supercells are persistent, wall cloud just doesn't come and go. It'll last at least 10 to 20 minutes. And that's usually the length of time that it will be within your sight, unless you're chasing it. Any more than 10 to 20 minutes, and it's probably going to go past your view, unless you're following it. It'll have persistent rotation. Again, persistence is the key. It's something that lasts for the duration of the time that you can see it. And rotation is usually visible and swift. And then surface inflow, because the storm is sucking up air into it, usually you'll have a pretty strong wind blowing into the updraft. If you're facing the wall cloud, the wind would be at your back, blowing at 20 to 30 miles per hour toward the wall cloud. And then another common feature with wall clouds is upward and downward motion. You'll see cloud fragments going out, being sucked up into the wall cloud, and you also see downward cloud motion a lot of times. All four of these don't have to be present, but you'll normally see at least two of them. Persistence you have to have. Rotating wall cloud again with, of course, time lapse, so it's very dramatic. debris cloud underneath the funnel, then you can have a tornado even without being able to see the whole tornado. These three pictures, there's definitely debris on the ground beneath the funnel, so these are tornadoes even though you can only see part of the funnel. This is like an idealized radar image of a supercell. The downdraft area is kind of the front side. The storm's moving northeast, so your downdraft is kind of out ahead of the updraft. Here's your rain-free base and your updraft. And sometimes the downdraft air will rotate around the updraft, so you can actually get a rain-wrapped tornado. If that rotation is strong enough, it will wrap the cooler air completely around the tornado. But a lot of times on radar, there'll be this comma-shaped appearance. Sometimes we call this a hook echo, and this would be your like a classic supercell, like what you get with a strong tornado. And this clear slot in here, this is a spotter. Ideally would be located somewhere down in here so that you can see the rain-free updraft if he's to the southeast, but the storm's moving northeast, so he's not, or he or she is not in the path of the tornadic circulation. So, in order to do all this, you have to know where you are in reference to the updraft and downdraft. In other words, if you're a spotter here, you need to know what you're looking at and whether or not you're in the right place. And you have to know which direction the storm is moving, which, if you have access to radar on the internet, you can tell that quickly. And that way you can be in the right position. And then you want to be positioned so the storm is moving from your left to your right. If it's not moving, if you're up here somewhere, then the storm's moving from your right to your left. So here's the radar image on the left of the supercell, and you can kind of see that hook, that comma-shaped appearance. Here's the comma head, and here's the tail of it. And so your rain-free updraft is right in here. That's where you might have your wall cloud or tornado. This is, by the way, the yellow line is the Wabash River, so this is right along the Indiana-Illinois state line, and the storm is moving toward the northeast into Indiana. If you were a spotter in the blue house, most likely you'd be seeing something like this. Of course, this is not the actual picture. This is probably somewhere in Utah, but anyway, you'd be seeing nothing but dark skies. And then if you're in the yellow house looking toward the northwest, you're probably able to see any kind of tornadic activity. These four pictures are these funnel clouds or tornadoes, and the big hint here is they are not rotating. Well, any kind of non-rotating cloud is not a funnel cloud, so all these pictures are low-hanging clouds. And what is this feature here? This is a rotating cloud feature. Well, that's the wall cloud, and it's in the right location. It's on the rain-free updraft. It's in the rain-free updraft area. Here's your downdraft. And this particular wall cloud did develop into a very intense tornado about 15 minutes later. What is this feature? This is a shelf cloud. It's the leading edge of the cooler air kind of rushing out from the storm. It's associated with the downdraft area. And it's the first part of the storm. Is the storm, usually it's a line of storms that produces this kind of a long shelf cloud. And that's the first thing you'll see as the line of storms comes toward you. Okay, this is actually the start of a video that may or may not play.
Jump in the car. I need to move your camera. I hope so. What we're hoping is this gonna turn off the more, but I don't know. Jump in my car. I'm sorry. She needs to get a minute back. Okay. It's huge, it's huge.
Apparently is a wall cloud. The beginning of it, it was hard to tell if, because the trees were in the way, it was hard to tell if it was touching the ground or not, but it appeared not to be. This is a little bit tricky because it's a still picture, but this is rotating. This is a mammoth tornado, the one that hit Joplin, Missouri, EF5, that hit Joplin in 2011, I think it was, that killed about 200 people, I think. Anyway, one of the worst tornadoes in American history, and this is called a wedge tornado because it's like a big, huge black wedge. This would be probably what the tri-state tornado of 1925 looked like, big, massive tornado. What are these? And there is rotation. These are funnel clouds. Now, this may or may not play. This is like a 4-minute video that
things to wrap them off here. We're going to start. Did everyone get a ticket? Okay. 572073 is going to go for a t-shirt from courtesy of Williamson County Fire Protection District. Okay, we got another shirt here from Williamson County Fire Protection District. $572055.
Some of them signed on the back.
Oh, okay. Danny Martin. We have a NOAA all hazard weather radio, courtesy of S.T.O.R.M, rare weather alert. No name on the back, so 572066.
Just roll. Got plenty
You
of
don't want
radio.
it?
Got plenty of radio.
All right, well, roll again.
Only if he gets it the second time.
Could have given it to me.
Ron Goodegrove.
Get it, Paul?
There you go. Okay, last thing here is courtesy of Pike County Health Department. Emergency bag, emergency kit, is that what it's called? Red Cross. Sam, is it Bomberart? Oh. All right, that's what we have today. We appreciate everybody coming out.
Yeah.